Hi, I'm James Martis with Plus One, a proud member of NTCA, and I want to welcome you to the Smart Rural Community 3-part Senior Safety Series designed to keep you safe online. You can expect to learn how to create strong passwords, what to do if you experience a data breach, and how to recognize phishing attempts before they catch you. Whether you watch the videos individually or as a complete set, you'll discover helpful tips and tools presented in a practical and straightforward way to protect yourself confidently. Your guide to online safety is around the corner. Well, let's get into understanding phishing and how to spot it. And we can start off with a definition so we're all on the same page. Phishing is a type of online scam where attackers impersonate a legitimate organization or individual to steal our information, such as passwords, credit card numbers, social security numbers, etc. So this is a play on the word of fishing, right? You go fishing, you put some bait on a line, you cast it, you figure someone's going to bite. And that's what these bad actors are expecting as well. That if they send out enough emails, somebody's going to reply to it. Someone's going to click and engage with me, the bad actor, so that I can trick them into giving me access to their data or sending me money. Now, what we see here is a report put out every year by the FBI called the Elder Fraud Report. So for those, it covers those that are 60 years plus. And what this showed, at least in 2023, the most lucrative way for scammers to take advantage of this group were investment scams at over $1 billion. Now, again, keep in mind, this is only from what has been reported. So the amount of money and the number of people affected is actually much higher than this. This is just what's been reported. The second most lucrative way for hackers to take advantage of the elderly are tech support scams. And we're all familiar with these. The pop-up on our computer telling us that we have a virus, call this number to have it resolved for a problem that we actually don't have. And in the process, we pay them for this service that we don't need, or we give them access to our bank account without realizing it, and they empty out our bank account while they're supposedly helping us. Business email scams, where maybe the business is saying you need to update your password. In the process, we're actually giving them our password, which is unfortunate. Confidence and romance scams, which we've also covered in other sessions in this series, and government impersonation scams, like an IRS notification that you are late on your taxes, and if you don't pay something today, you're going to even incur a higher financial penalty, or we're about to send the cops to your house because you're so delinquent with your tax payments. Something that tricks us into thinking we need to give them something today to avoid a bigger problem. Now, there are a couple examples I want to set this up with before I get into really how to identify phishing or attacks that are trying to trick us. And here's an example of an email from a financial institution. So imagine that I received this email right here. So instead of coming in, Dear James or Dear Mr. Martis, it's coming in, Dear Customer. Now, can a legitimate institution do that? They can. But is that normally what you would expect from your bank? I would say probably not. It's also missing some punctuation. Now again, do people make mistakes? Of course they do. But this should already make our spidey senses increase. Maybe the hair on the back of our neck rise a little bit to let us think this might be something that's fishy and not something I should click on or trust the number it tells me to call. But it also tells me to re-update my account information. Re-update, that's not the way we normally speak, right? That's an unusual way to say to update. I mean, what's the difference between updating and re-updating? It's a weird use of the word or the weird use of the English language. That should also let us know that maybe this is nefarious. Now, I could go on, but the point is, this is how we identify phishing, is by looking at these different things that set off our mind to say, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem legitimate. Of course, people can make mistakes. There are a little too many mistakes. Now, that was one via email and traditionally what we called phishing. The same process of appearing legitimate and sending us a message, if it's done over text, is now referred to as smishing. It's a play off of the SMS, so taking the S and called smishing, where the email is phishing. And if they're calling you and doing the same process, hi, I'm from the bank, that would be called a vishing because it's voice, but it's all the same concept, right, of phishing. In this case, you're being notified by a financial institution of a charge at a pet store. Was this you? If not, call us. And you think, oh, I didn't make that charge. I better call that number right now to let them know that this is fraudulent. Well, it was fraudulent to begin with, and now once they get me on the phone, they're going to ask me for things to take advantage. They're going to either want me to give a password to verify who I am, or they're going to say they want me to give them my account number so that they can refund the money, and in the process, they're going to end up tricking me so that they can actually take money from my account. Right? That's what these are trying to do. So what do we do? What are the telltale signs? Where should we begin with when we get emails and when we get text messages so that we make sure we're not getting taken advantage of? Well, the first thing we should always do is look at that from address, right? The email address. So think if it's a bank, it might be support@yourbank.com. But scammers will use variations because depending on their sophistication, they may not be able to spoof, and I'll talk about that a bit more here in a minute. Spoofing where they actually looks legitimate, actually uses the actual phone number or name of the bank. So what they'll do is they'll change O's for zeros, so that if you're just quickly reading it, it looks legitimate, but then you would think, well, why would my financial institution use that? They wouldn't. But that's what they'll do. So that should certainly set you off to not interact with that text or that email. Keep in mind, you can also click on the name sometimes to make sure that you can see the email address. So sometimes they know how to make it appear like it's a known contact, right? If you get an email from somebody and it's not a known contact, you see the email address. But if it's a known contact and you've added them, say John Doe, it'll say it's from John Doe. Well, if they're sophisticated and they're sending you an email from an email address that you don't have in your contacts, they might be able to make it look like it's coming from John Doe, and you think your initial thought is, oh, this must be somebody I've known before, so this must be legitimate. Well, keep in mind, you can always click on the name to see the email address. That way that might help set you off to know that's not a legitimate email address or a legitimate email address from my financial institution. Another is to never click on a link directly. So if you get an email on your desktop or on your computer, you can use your mouse to just hover over that link, that hot link or magic link or hyperlink, however it is you refer to it. And when you hover over it and just leave the cursor over the link, it should show you the full URL. So you can kind of do a quick investigation. Is that going to a legitimate place, to a place that whatever this legitimate company would be sending me to, rather than something that looks illegitimate? Now, if you're using, say, your smartphone or a tablet and you don't have a mouse, what you do is you long press. So if you click the link and then hold down, don't deselect it, then it should also show you that URL. Then when you release, it doesn't take you there unless you just do the tap. So you should be able to just long press to see that full URL to figure out if it looks legitimate or not. Now keep in mind, some of these tips require you to use your judgment, right? All I can do is give you ways that they try to trick us. Ultimately, it's up to us to try to figure out if we're getting tricked. Other red flags, though, in combination of these, are urgent or threatening language, kind of like act now or you'll be suspended, or act now or final notice, or you're going to be cut off today, or you're about to receive a much greater penalty, or you're about to be arrested. All of these kinds of language or threatening language should be a red flag for us. Obviously, sometimes there might be an emergency that day, but it's unlikely that that's what your bank is going to be telling you. I've already covered everything from poor grammar to spelling errors to awkward phrasing. That should all tip us off that something looks a little fishy here. And I probably shouldn't be clicking on things or calling the number that's provided in that text or that email if there's grammar, spelling errors, or awkward phrasing. Unsolicited attachments. This is very common. You'll just receive an email with something titled invoice.pdf, or here's a photo, or here's a movie to watch. And what they want us to do is to access that document. Sometimes just the act of accessing that attachment installs a virus or installs malware onto our device. Or it's just a further way to trick us so that we call the number in that attachment or believe that they're legitimate. So, think about it. If you didn't request an invoice from somebody, or you wouldn't be getting an invoice from somebody, you probably shouldn't be clicking that attachment. And the last point, another red flag, direct requests for sensitive information. Your financial institution is never going to ask you to text them your password. They're never going to ask you to give that password over the phone. They shouldn't be asking for your social security number, even though sometimes they do, but you shouldn't be required to give that. So anytime that you're required to give this over the phone or in a form, you want to make sure that everything looks legitimate, right? So if it is a financial institution, that domain is for your bank and not potentially someone impersonating your bank. Some best practices to help you in this process, and we hear about it all the time, and that is, and I've said this before in the series, keep all of your software up to date, whether it's on your devices or your computers or your laptops. You want to make sure that the operating systems are up to date. They are not perfect, and they have updates. Sometimes there are backdoors into the operating system, and they get corrected with updates. That's why we want to keep our software up to date. But you also want to have an antivirus program that can also scan your device to make sure that nothing nefarious is on there, and to continually check for malware. That's the bad software that we ultimately unintentionally install when we're clicking on things that we shouldn't be. You also want to enable spam filters for your email providers. Hopefully, we're mostly all familiar with this. That's the junk folder or the spam folder. We know that sometimes legitimate things get put in the junk folder and spam folder. But this is just an effort by our email providers to help us have an inbox and have a separate box of this might be nefarious content. A lot of times it's just that spammy email. Technically legitimate emails, just the stuff that we don't want to see every day. But in there will be nefarious things. When you identify that, if you're checking out your spam or junk folder, you should press the button with the email provider of saying this was a phishing attempt or this was junk. Let them know so that they also get better at identifying to protect us all. That's how we're all going to do better to protect each other. And always verify independently. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you get something that says you need to act now, and you're thinking, I don't think this is real, but if it was, it would be serious. So, I don't want to ignore it. And James says I shouldn't click it. I shouldn't call the number. Well, you don't have to call the number that was texted to you. You don't have to call the number that was emailed to you. If it's from your bank, you can go on your own to the bank's website. Look up the contact information. I'm going to call that number from the actual website and then tell them, hey, I received this email that says this, right? So at least that way, you're calling a legitimate number from the legitimate institution to confirm something that your spidey sense was telling you was wrong. And that's the independent verification. You don't have to use what was sent to you. You can go and look it up yourself and call that number. And so you see it all kind of works together. The antivirus and the spam filters and our manual, our own intuition, together is how we protect ourselves from these phishing attempts. Now, there's actually a really neat online quiz that Google put together with Jigsaw. You can find it at phishingquiz.withgoogle.com. There's the URL up there at the top. And I just want to go through a few as an example, but you should definitely do this on your own. It's free. You don't have to really give them any information. I think they ask for your name or email address so that they can use that in the quiz to try to see if they could stump you into figuring out if something was legitimate or not. Okay, here's one example. Someone sends me an email that they shared a document. So I got a document here. I got an email from someone supposedly named Luke Johnson, and it says it's called the department budget. Now, if you're retired, you probably aren't going to be sent any department budget attachments. So that should already tell you this is not legitimate. I shouldn't be clicking on department budgets because I'm not dealing with department budgets anymore. But let's say that you are still working. Do I know a Luke Johnson? Was I waiting on a department budget document from Luke Johnson? Right now, if I'm not, again, another reason why I probably shouldn't be clicking on this stuff. But in this case, let's assume that I knew Luke Johnson. Like they had spoofed the name. Maybe it's someone from my company, because sometimes hackers will get a company email from a company or from somebody we know that will steal our contacts, and then they'll email you back from somebody that you do know, so it looks legitimate. We've all received this, right? Even from a relative sometimes, and we think, hey, we let them know, we think your account got hacked because they emailed 500 people all at once. Well, in this case, if you were to hover over the link address, it's not a legitimate URL, right? And so that's just a way of figuring out that, and a way to test to make sure that you don't click on something, that you hover over it first to make sure that that URL looks legitimate. Another is, don't give up your credentials. So in this case, you get another phishing attempt. It's an email coming purportedly from PayPal. And man, does this look legitimate, right? They've got the logo. It's formatted nicely. They even have at the very bottom, don't recognize this invoice. It's like a warning, like don't be clicking on things that you didn't ask for. Well, that's good advice, PayPal. So this really looks legitimate, right? And what does it say? Oh man, there was a charge. Well, I didn't make that charge, so I better click on this, right? And that's what they're trying to do. And so in this case, these phishers are hoping that you'll call this number, but in this case, this is not a legitimate number. So they did a really good job here in trying to trick you, trying to trick me, right? The only way you would know is if you had looked up whether or not this was actually one of PayPal's customer support numbers. Time to upgrade. So here's Dropbox, a service if you're not familiar with Dropbox, where we can keep our files, upload our pictures and documents. And it's time for me to upgrade. It's no longer syncing correctly. New files have been added, won't be accessible. It's time to upgrade. I need to get more storage, right? And click here to upgrade. I got to pay a little bit more to get more storage. Is this legitimate? It doesn't have my name, but it says it's from Dropbox. Well, this actually is a legitimate email. It actually is from Dropbox. And if you hover over the blue box, again, you'll see this if you're doing the quiz live, you'll notice that it actually goes to Dropbox's website. So this is a legitimate one. And I'm showing it to you because even though it doesn't have my name, right? It just says hi, comma. It doesn't say hi, James, or hi, Mr. Martis. This is, in fact, a legitimate one. That's why they're not always illegitimate, and we have to use some of our own judgment here. Now, I also mentioned we get these via text. So here's an example. On the first screen, notice, if I had your phone out, you'll notice you get a verification code from Google. And then the second text message is, did you request a password change? Now, so the second screen is the text message say, did you request a password reset? If so, please ignore, otherwise respond with cancel plus the verification code, right? And then the other text message, the verification code. Now, that's not how verification code works, right? If you've turned on multi-factor authentication or 2FA, you're going to enter that code into the application. You've entered your username and password, or your password manager has done that, as we've discussed in the password session of this series. And then if you turned on MFA, you'll get a code that you would then enter, right? That code. You don't text the code back to a separate number, right? That would be weird. And that's why you shouldn't do that, because what they're trying to do is to get the code from the account that they're trying to hack into, and they want you to send you the code that they need. Here I'm getting a notification from Netflix. It says your account is on hold. And this is unfortunate. I mean, I want to Netflix and chill tonight. I don't want my Netflix account to be on hold. What do I got to do to fix this, right? And it says to recover your account immediately, click here. All right. Now, does this look legitimate? Well, let's look at that. Who is it from? It says Netflix at and a bunch of gobbledygook at the top. That does not look legitimate. Now, is it possible that Netflix has a weird address? I guess, but that should still set off your spidey senses or the hair on the back of your neck to say this probably is not legitimate. Now, let's look at that domain a little bit more closely. Notice it doesn't end in netflix.com. It actually ends in onlinehome.us. What they've done is they have purchased the domain onlinehome.us and then added the subdomain, which they can create any subdomain they want. They could use jamesmartis.onlinehome.us without my permission. They can create any subdomain they want. But if you're just looking at it quickly, you might think, oh, it is netflix.com, so I can click on that. That should be safe. No, it's the very last part of the URL that matters, that should tell you who it is or who owns it. And in this case, because it doesn't end in Netflix.com, should tell you this is not something I should click. Now, again, imagine you got this and you just weren't sure. You're like, James, well, what do I do if I'm not sure? Well, what I said was, well, you can always open up your Netflix app. Does it work properly? Open your Netflix app up and go into the account section. Is it asking you to update any information? Go to your desktop, go to Netflix.com and log in. Are there any issues or problems? Do you see what I'm saying? That's an independent verification. You don't have to do what it tells you to do. You can do it the way you want to do it, and thereby avoiding a mistake. Oh, I love this one, a free phone. These things cost so much money, right? I mean, we're spending $1,000 each one every time we buy them now. So if somebody was offering you a free phone or telling you you were a finalist for a free phone, you might be compelled to click on it, or at least talk to you. I mean, I'll sign up. I'll do that. But again, these are tricks. Getting us to click can install malware. Getting us to click can get us to get on the phone to them. Somebody convinces us to give our credentials to them. This is why we don't want to do these things. But again, we're taking the quiz. So we're getting an offer here for a free phone. And in this case, it's just schedule a phone call. Should you click it? Should you accept it? As the quiz shows us, it says, be very careful when offers are too good to be true. I think we've all experienced two offers that are too good to be true. As we get older, we get a little bit wiser to this, recognizing that if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. So that should be, point number one, the red flag that maybe I shouldn't be clicking on anything here. But this is also pretty tricky because you'll notice who it comes from. Again, it says it's coming from someone. So it looks as if though it's legitimate, right? Because it's a real name. It's not just a random email address with a bunch of bizarre numbers or letters that we're not familiar with. It is actually a person. And again, this might make us think it's legitimate, but in reality, it's not, because they've been able to spoof someone's name in the who field. And last but not least, we tend to get a lot more text messages. I'm sure the smishing is going to only increase over time as we're all using cellular phones and we're using text messages, and we expect to get text messages now for notifications. So in this case, you're getting a UPS alert. Is this legitimate? So it says, hey, a package from the Google store is arriving via UPS today. Are you home? Should we leave it with a neighbor? Click here. Deliver on another day? Click here. So you think, oh man, well, I don't want something that's of value just sitting out on my porch. There's so many porch pirates. Let me really look at this domain here, ups.com. It looks legitimate. Well, except for the fact that I didn't order anything from the Google store. And I happen to be a Mac house, and so nobody would be ordering anything from the Google store at my house. So this probably is not legitimate, right? That might be one thing that you can tell yourself. If you didn't order something from the store, and nobody would have from your home ordered from that store, you probably shouldn't be clicking on any of those links. But as I said, those URLs look legitimate. So somebody might think, I'll click on this. But in reality, you should use your common sense to say, I didn't purchase anything from here. I should expect that this is not a legitimate attempt. Now, should we get something that comes into us that we recognize as spam or recognize as junk, increasingly our phone will offer this option at the bottom of that text where it'll say report as junk. And you should do that because we want to get our providers to get better at recognizing these nefarious campaigns, and we can all do it together by doing that. But if it doesn't even recognize it itself as something that it thinks might be fishy, you can always forward it to what's called spam at 7726. Essentially, all the providers will accept this. So if you forward it to 7726, that'll help whatever carrier you're using better identify when these attempts are being sent to all of us on that network. And here's kind of a tip that I love to give because it's certainly one that I do. We get a lot of text messages now. You can't go to the store and buy socks anymore without being asked to give your cell phone number. And once you give your cell phone number, you start to get text messages. We're all very familiar with this. But sometimes it's legitimate, right? Maybe I shop at that store a lot and I know I'm going to get these text messages. Maybe it's a copy of my receipt. Maybe it's an offer for a discount or a promotional offer. Well, what you can do to help yourself is, let's say it was the sock store because I use socks as an example. So if I'm getting a text message and I recognize that's legitimate and that's what they text me from is this number, well, then save it in your contacts as sock store. And so what I do is I'll call it sock store, and in the last name field, I'll put in text. So I get a bunch of text messages that end in text because I know that it's from that company. So if it's from my bank, text messages I get, it's the name of my bank, text. If it's from the pet store I go to, it's the name of the pet store, text, right? So that way when they come through, I know I've already saved that texted number in my contacts to know it's legitimate. And it makes it a lot easier on me. That way when it comes in from something I don't have saved, it already lets me know, is this legitimate or not? And I'm sure this will help you because I recognize how many texts we're getting today. So as we come to an end, final best practices, make account check-ins a habit. That means just logging into your bank account. If you have an investment account that, let's say you're not really looking at very often, maybe at least once a month log in to make sure that there's nothing happening on there that you're not aware of. Look over those transactions and set up alerts. We've mentioned this throughout the series. There are things we can do to protect ourselves. Having stronger passwords, a password manager, using a multi-factor authentication, right? Getting that second factor coming in, which might be a texted code. But you can also set up alerts, right? Whether it's with have I been pwned or with your bank to say, if something happens, notify me of that happening, right? That way you can at least, it's reactive, but you can at least stay on top of any fraudulent activity as soon as it occurs. That's a wrap on this session of the Smart Rural Community 3-part Senior Safety Series. We hope you enjoyed learning about these tips and tools to keep you safe online. We would also like to thank our promotional partner, Calix, for their support of the series and the Smart Rural Community Program. To learn more, please visit smartruralcommunity.org/senior safety. See you next time and stay safe.